Welcome to Distinctly Well. I'm your host, Leo Tonkin. And in each episode, we engage in insightful and distinct conversations with a variety of experts, innovators, thought leaders, and friends, exploring what it truly means to live and be well in all facets of life. Let's explore, learn, and grow together. Welcome to Distinctly Well. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Distinctly Well. I'm Leo Tonkin, your host, and I'm very excited about our guest today, Max Ansbacher, who grew up in New York and lives a lot in West Palm Beach now. And he's got a very diverse background that he'll be sharing with you. Primarily grew up, ended up at Yale Law School, and then was a financial guy on Wall Street in New York, where he really was one of the guys that really started the whole options market in trading, and wrote a book, his first book, The New Options Market, which became a bestseller and was used in Harvard's business school's curriculum. He's been featured in Forbes magazine. He's often been quoted in the media, the Wall Street Journal, and been a guest commentator on a lot of the types of shows you would expect, like Bloomberg Television, Fox, CNBC. He has a diverse background in Broadway musical that he's involved in. He helped create the Great Lectures. And he's got a very philanthropical way of how he lives his life with Christine here in West Palm and New York. So I want to welcome everybody. Really, the purpose of joining is I was introduced to him, and he wrote a book called A Practical Guide to Happiness. So when we start looking at happiness in part of being well and our well-being, happiness plays a big deal. So curious to dive in a little bit deeper, and just want to welcome Max. Thank you for joining Distinctly Well.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, certainly.
So tell me, as someone who has been, I would say, on top of the financial world, what was the impetus to write a book on happiness?
Well, you're right. It's completely different. And the reason that I wrote it was that I myself had been unhappy for much of my life. And I would go from one down, being in a dark place, to coming up again. Something good happened, and this went on and on. And so I started seeing everyone I could, therapists, doctors, psychiatrists, and nothing seemed to do any good. So I finally decided to take matters into my own hands and do my own research. And I read 18 books on happiness by professionals who study that. And there's been a lot of studies made on happiness. And then I looked at the people around me and studied them. I knew a lot of people from Wall Street and so on, friends of mine, and figured out why some were happy and some were not, and what was the big difference between them.
So I know that you have a few rules that we'll get into, but I know it's an interesting thing because so many people think that if you are financially well, you would be happy. And I know there's been cliches around money doesn't buy happiness, but at the same time, what was missing?
Well, I think it was my own view of myself that was missing. I never felt that I'd accomplished very much, and that made me very unhappy. For example, at Yale Law School, I was not in the top half of my class. And I said, my goodness, you're a failure, Max. You were always in the top of your class in high school and in college, and now you're not even in the top half. So I guess you're never cut out to be a lawyer. And of course, if I had thought about it and applied the rules I have now to my happiness, I would have said, wait a minute, Yale Law School is one of the most difficult law schools in the country to get into. So I would have said, wow, being admitted to Yale Law School is a great triumph and something I should have been happy about. But because of my ideas, I just couldn't be happy about that.
I'm interested because as I was reading your book, I was trying to map my own life to it, and I'm listening it through my own filters. And to your point, it seems like the way it is never good enough. there's always something else or something next, or that if you had X, Y, or Z, that would make you happy. So share that, because here you are talking about Yale Law School. I know you did financially very well at Bear Stearns, and with all your clients that you've worked on your whole career. What is it that makes people happy?
Well, there have been a lot of surveys done on that very subject. And the best one is called the Harvard Longitudinal Study of Happiness. And that was started way back in 1938, interviewing all the graduates of Harvard at that time. It's been going on for every year since. And what this is all about is that they send researchers out to talk to people and in-depth discussions. It isn't just like a poll where you on the phone where you say, well, are you happy or not happy? No, they spent hours and sometimes a whole day with their subjects, finding out what made them happier. And here's the answer. They found one thing that was consistent, whether we had it or not, and it correlated exactly with people's level of happiness. And that was, how many good friends do you have? That was
Interesting.
the element in determining everybody's. And it didn't matter if you were rich or poor or healthy or unhealthy or whatever. And certainly not money was not a determinant of whether people were happy or not. And I think we have a lot of people around Palm Beach who can agree with that. Money doesn't buy happiness. But what does is, if you have good, solid friendships to back you up, that you know are there in case you need them, and who you enjoy being with.
Interesting about that with friends. Obviously you've lived a very prosperous life over the years. I believe in wisdom as we get older. Social media these days, COVID and the pandemic, people being more isolated as we get older, going into other types of communities. How do you see that impacting the level of happiness, that you're talking about?
Well, it's very sad that people don't interact as much as they used to. And it's our whole society is sort of set up that make it easy to stay at home and watch video television, but that doesn't really make you happy. It's not the same. And even telephone calls, while they're wonderful, are not as good as in-person conversations with human beings. And we are human beings, and nature made us that way, and nature made us appreciate other human beings. We're social animals.
Yes.
So that is why that's the key. And to the extent that we're each in our own home and watching our own programs, different programs, people don't even have something in common to talk about. So you're right, there is a challenge there in the modern age.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the whole phenomenon, because I'm sure I remember growing up hearing some kind of a rule, not even a rule, a saying that said, money doesn't buy happiness. It's not the most important thing. However, it sure beats what's second. It was like,
Well,
we have circumstances in life, and we all go through life. And as the expression is, stuff happens. How, in the face of circumstances, can people just create happiness? It seems that depending on my circumstances, that might determine how I'm happy. How do you get out of that vicious cycle?
well, the first thing you have to know is if there's something really tragic going on in your life, you're not expected to be happy. You shouldn't try to be happy. If, God forbid, your spouse dies, that's a terrible, terrible thing. And anyone who thinks they can just smile their way out of that is in for a rude awakening. So the important negative things have to be accepted for what they are. But with time, people then get used to that, and they go back to their normal amount of happiness.
Do you do any rituals? Are there things? I know that you were talking about, in the book, about you went from one thing to the next thing, searching and getting there. And at some point you had some realization about being content and happy with the way things are. How do you do any rituals? How do you get your that mindset,
Well,
to get going?
right. Well, the important thing is to appreciate what our life is, appreciate what we have. And, if you went around to most people and said, "What do you want?" They would say, "Oh boy, the trouble is I can't afford to have a Rolls Royce Deluxe, or I can't afford to take the Queen Mary to London and back." People would think of a lot of things they don't have, and they wish that if they had them, they would be happier. But having these wishes is a negative factor, because if you want something you don't have, that's a negative factor. So the answer to that is to think about what you do have. Want what you have. And the way to practice that is that I do it every morning when I get up or when I'm lying in bed and wake up. I think of 5 things that I'm grateful for. 5 things that I'm so glad I have in life. And once you start thinking about things that way, wow, you say, "Oh boy, I'm a lucky person."
Yeah, when I was reading the book, I know you have the 3 basic rules, and with the rule of want what you have.
Yes.
I've actually been sharing that with people, and it is a mindset. We live in this.
Smart. You can do that.
Huh?
It's not
What's it?
trademarked, so.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad I have your permission. But it is. It's interesting. It is a mindset. I mean, when I said earlier, it seems that so much of our lives is about achieving some goal or getting somewhere or attaining, whether it's a status or getting the right car or doing the travel or doing the things. And the more that you have on the list, it seems that the more it infers that the way it is not okay, that something's missing. So, I've been sharing that with my wife about want what you have. So anytime something comes up, it's like, honey, want what you have.
And yes, we all have so much if we think about it. The tangibles and the intangibles. Our friends.
Yep.
We can look back at the past and say, "Wow, did I have a lot of fun when I, was growing up?" Or do I enjoy right now various activities, sports and things, watching television? There's so many things. And living in the United States of America, what a wonderful thing that is.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, you start looking at the way the world is, though, as well, and some of the things around. And here we are talking about happiness, yet there's a balance there. I appreciate what you said about if you have grief, you got to be present to it. You can't bury it. You can't put it somewhere else under the rug. But to your point, how do you practice that? What was the determining factor when you wrote this book? Obviously, you've lived a great life. Some point you got there. What was the thing that really kind of had you? All right, I got to write this down.
Well, it was that I was up and down, and I had good times when I said, "Wow, this is great," and I'm very happy. And then I had other times when I was unhappy. So when I was happy, I said, "Gee, I've learned how to be happy. I think I could write this down." I'd always been good at writing things. I was a lawyer. And so I started writing. And it took me 10 years to write my book because of the fact that I became unhappy during parts of it.
Really?
So, never mind that I thought I was telling people how to be happy. I couldn't be happy all the time myself.
Right. Right. Well, is there now an expectation that because you wrote this book, you're supposed to be walking around being happy all the time?
Well, I think there is, yes. But that doesn't mean that you're laughing and smiling all the time.
Yeah.
What it really means is to be happy is to be content with yourself. That's the goal. That's another version of happiness.
Yeah, it seems almost that we sort of go backwards in our society. You got back to the social media. We're living in an era where you have the highest suicide rates. You have kids growing up. I know I have 4 grandkids, and I wonder, the way life is. How do we get out of that? How do we really share wisdom and advice for the generations to come?
Well, you talk to them. I mean, that's and inspire them to think about happy thoughts, actually. I remember when I was working for a big financial firm, I looked out on the floor. They had all the people, the brokers were there, were busy trying to get trades, and they weren't particularly happy. But I happened to notice the shoe shine man who came around then every day to shine your shoes. And he was very happy. And it occurred to me that he was the happiest person in the room and at the
Right.
same time the poorest.
Yeah.
And I went to him and said, gee, how are you so happy? And he said, well, because I have accomplished what I want. I was able to send 4 children through college. And so now I'm a happy man. I've
Yeah.
done what I wanted to.
Yeah.
It was a noble thing to do.
Very good. So in your book, I know you come up with a few rules. I know that we just talked about one of the rules being, want what you have. Share
Right.
a couple of the other ones that you feel are part of the principles and foundation of your book.
We talked about nourishing friendships. That's certainly one of the important, and want what you have. Those are 2 basic ones. Third one that's pretty important is know your own values. And this is something a lot of people don't know, but it means who are you really? What do you stand for? What are your principles? And they can be all kinds of things that you stand for. Some people might say, wow, I'm the best golfer in my country club, and that's important to them, and they know that's important, and they get joy out of that. Other people will say, I made a vow that I would do everything I could to make my granddaughter happy, and that's what I do. And once you know your values, you can easily get out of a lot of quandaries. For example, supposing there's a conflict and your granddaughter is in this play, the school play, and she's got a leading role in it. But the same night that there's going to be this play, that's when they have the tournament winners get announced. And so you have what should you do? Go to the golf tournament that you're happy about, or go to your granddaughter's? And of course, if you know what your main value is, you go to the play and say, come on, honey, and you give her a big round of applause. That's what
Right.
will make you happy.
Right. Well, you brought up the types of relationships. You've been married for some time to Christine. How do you have a happy marriage?
Well, it's a complicated story. And one of them is to go along with what your spouse wants to do.
Yeah.
That's certainly a big part of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And no, I'm just saying, happiness, I wonder, it seems that for most of us, it's more external, that we are looking at our lives through a certain filter, and it's how we react to the circumstances in front of us. What I hear from you is, regardless of the circumstances, how is it that you can generate that happiness? I get that one of those is to have friends and be
right.
Be with others. We're very tribal,
Right.
birds flock, fish school, and people like to tribe and belong. So I can appreciate that. Wanting what you have, great. That's one of those as well. Values, when you're clear about who you are, then you're not so pressured maybe from the outside about what you should do or what you should be like. I see a lot of,
Exactly. And if all your neighbors say they have to have a brand new Mercedes Benz, and you say, well, a car is just a car to get you somewhere, that's your value. And you're not going to be jealous of other people because you say, hey, that's their life. I have my values.
Yep. Yep. What else in the book that you feel is very poignant for our listeners to understand about happiness?
Well, exercise is very important. People have shown that can make you happy. And it doesn't mean you have to kill yourself at the gym. Even 10 minutes a day of exercise can be beneficial. So that's one of the things you can do. And runners often talk about getting a high because they get endorphins, which are created when you're doing exercises. gives you more energy. That's one of the things. Um, you can get enough sleep. That's very important. Scientists have shown that if you don't get enough sleep, it creates a lot of unhappiness in many ways. And one of the things we found out, my wife and I found out, was that we had sleep apnea. You imagine you can have that without, doesn't mean you fall asleep in the middle of talking to somebody. If you get it, you could have a bad night's sleep. So we were tested in a lab and they said we had sleep apnea. And now we sleep with a CPAP on our faces. And it's a very happy thing. It's better for us. Eliminating time on your computer or in front of any screen is a good thing. And it's so easy to get wrapped up. The producers of television have got it down to a science so that you really can't stop watching. You have to keep watching. But meanwhile, what are you doing with your life? That's just wasted time, basically.
So, with regards to the screens, I know I have my grandkids, and they're always playing games and interacting and doing things. Today you go to a restaurant, and the first thing that parents do is put on screens for the kids.
It's the strangest thing to see two people in a restaurant, both of them on the phone.
Yeah. So what is it? So what is it now that your mission now? I know you've been up to a lot of things. So, you got this book. You're out there talking and speaking to others. I look at growing older, and we have a lot of things happening in the world about living longer, longevity. A lot that's happening. Here you are in a community. Are people happy around you? Obviously, when you show up, I'm sure they are if you're telling jokes and singing songs and stuff.
Yeah. But no, they say getting old is not for sissies, and it's definitely true.
Oh, interesting.
Happen to you, negative things happen, and you have to readjust your expectations.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And so if you're 93, you're not expected to go running in the park for an hour.
So you've learned a lot of lessons. What are some of the wisdom that you give, children nowadays?
Oh, children. Well, I don't know. I don't have any children myself, so I'm not too used to
Maybe I was going to get to that. I was going to say maybe that's why you've been so happy, is that you haven't had any children. I don't know.
Well, I grew up with one of four boys, so I had plenty of experience.
Did you have a happy childhood?
Yes. Oh, indeed I did. I look back on it and I say, wow, it was wonderful.
Yeah. And so what's next for you now? What are you up to now?
Well, to get the word out on how people could be happy. And one of the things they should think about is that happiness is a choice. By what you do, you can create your own happiness.
Yeah, no, I think that's key. I mean, a lot of people think happiness is being reactive to what's in front of you. Right. How is it that you can be proactive?
Yeah, by the right attitude.
Yep. But you're pretty active in the communities as well, right?
Yes, I would say so. I belong to a number of organizations. Sure.
Yeah, I would think that kind of creates part of that friendship, being involved in the community, belonging.
Yes, definitely. I believe that being happy is a choice that you make by what you do here, day and now. And in fact, I can even sing you a song if you'd like.
Oh, there you go. Here we go. This is going to be a first on Distinctly Well. We've got Max singing. I read somewhere that you sang bass in a group for a long time.
I did for 23 years in New York City.
Was that like a barbershop quartet type thing, or is that more of a choir?
Well, it was above that. We gave concerts in, the best concerts hall, Carnegie Hall, and so on and so forth.
Really? You were at Carnegie Hall singing bass, right?
Yeah. Dressed up in tuxedos and everything.
Yeah.
Well,
Here we go.
I'll send you my song. Happiness is yours to choose. Scare away those awful blues. Dee-dum, dee-dum. Happiness is yours to choose. Scare away those awful blues.
Very cool. Very cool. Well,
I composed that myself, by the way.
There you go. There you go. Well, Max, I appreciate you coming on the show. There's a lot of inspiration and hope that you provide for us. I'm glad to see you being active and using what you've learned along the way to try to give and inspire others. And I recommend everybody to check out the Practical Guide to Happiness by Max Ansbacher. I really appreciate you being on the show, Max. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure indeed.
Thanks for joining us in this episode of Distinctly Well. For all the show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, head over to distinctlywell.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show to never miss an episode, and check out the video version of each episode over on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, live distinctly, live well.